Do you get the memories once in a while that click in?
We walk up here nearly every day, and he says, I hear a different story every day.
Yep.
We walk by the building and Mother remembers
something. The synapse fires somewhere in your brain. When I had my office up here, this is where we parked. I went into that door countless times. The main building here, when you walked in, was pretty much the way it was. The floors would creak and it had that really neat, old-timey feel. And there was a stairway that kind of wrapped up, and it had the wood banister and really intricate carvings on it.
And all those rounded outcrops in the building are called sunshine rooms.
Yeah, the little bubble.
And the reason there's an equal rounded building or room on the other side of that.
Yep.
And the sun will shine in one of them rooms all day long.
Yep. It was really laid out correctly, you know, and they said before all the steel doors and windows and whatnot that it was designed so that the prevailing winds kept the place. And they claimed it was cool back in the day before they made everything so tight. And those aren't original. Those were just the smoking porches that they added. So then people couldn't escape. Although on the other side, we had people cut the bars off. Somebody hacked off, and they've since welded it up and lowered themselves down with sheets. And then we lost one, a detox client. You see those top windows that are about 6-8 inches, the very top? He forced that open and somehow got through there. He left a piece of his scalp and hair on the way out. At the one time, the halt unit was the only locked treatment facility in the state of Minnesota. There was actually a courtroom down in the basement of this building. It was kind of a story and a half, but there was a courtroom down there where they'd bring the judges in so we didn't have to bring the clients to court. And the old rumor was, and it still floats around town, that there was a tunnel going all the way to the courthouse for the clients. And over here was Hirsch East, which was the seclusion. They had the padded furniture and the padded walls, and you could actually lock them into basically a cage. It was kind of inhumane and cruel. But there were times that you didn't have a choice if you had a real combative one. We had a police officer actually have a client take his gun here in this building. Scary, but nothing happened.
But we've been in every inch of it.
Measured every inch of it. Turned every crank. Margot and I worked for months doing that. You know, it was wherever you found 5 minutes to go measure the rooms, and we had a digital deal, but we had to open how many hundreds and hundreds of doors and hallways.
770,000 square feet. That's big. That is big.
And the problem with this building, this half-mile building, it's either on or off. You can't say I'm going to heat this part or this part. It's just massive amounts of pipes and boilers. And we had a movie theater. We had a canteen where you could get ice cream and hot dogs and hamburgers and lunch. Got their 3 meals here, and it was self-contained. And then you take them out to a group home where they just didn't have the same resources.
They had fabric and sewing machines in here. They had looms. They made rugs. They did artwork. They painted on fabric. I remember some of the tapestries that were around were gorgeous. And the patients loved to come over here.
Psychiatrists had the ultimate authority. Now, most of the clients here were committed, and When their commitment was up, it was either a recommitment process or the psychologist, psychiatrist, whoever was in charge would say, no, Joe Smith should be able to try it on his own. We had a lot that were here short term. You know, everybody thinks that, oh, they're going to lock you up for 20 years. The vast majority were short-term clients on chemical dependency and mental health units. We had the Hirsch clients, the chronically mentally ill that were here year after year. I'm not going to lie about that, but they needed to be somewhere. And we took good care of them. We really did. And I think the actual treatment by today's standards would have been called minimal. We did a lot of self-fulfillment, self-realization skills. We'd give them a job. If they were on decent behavior, they got to mingle with people. And I think that went a lot further than group skills sometimes. You know, there was programming on the units. I'm not going to say there wasn't. Back in the late 80s through the 90s, I think they were experimenting with a lot of antipsychotic drugs that had just come to the market. And I don't know that they had them dialed in so much. You know, you're never going to get Merck or any big drug maker to say it was a test deal. Once you're committed, and I don't know if it was nationwide, it was Minnesota, you could force meds back in those days. There were people that were here 30, 40 years, if not more. Some of the clients that started over in the CTAC came here as youngsters, preteens, and lived here until it closed.
The mentally ill patients were pretty much structured to try to get back into society.
Yep.
Without creating a problem.
In the 90s, they got into the age appropriateness. So you had a DD client that had the mind of a 2 or 3-year-old. You couldn't go push them in a swing or use the teeter-totter. We weren't allowed to take them out in this building and take them swinging because it wasn't age appropriate.
Yeah.
So for a few years, a good long number of years, that was the big thing. Yeah. Oh, he's 27, you can't push him in a swing. All he wanted to do was swing. This building was all the higher level DD clients. There was a swing set out there and we couldn't use it after they went through that age appropriate thing. And the teeter-totter, gosh no.
So consequently, all of the swings that were handicap accessible, you could actually wheel a wheelchair.
Oh yeah, we had a wheelchair swings.
They sat in boxes down in the tunnel and never got put up.
Yep.
Over foolishness.
The problem with things like this is it's somebody, a legislature in St. Paul who's never walked these halls, has no idea what a mental health client is or a chemical dependency or a developmentally disabled client is. No clue. They're writing the rules that, oh no, that person shouldn't be swinging.
No.
I would like to swing.
They've never come to their job and had to pick a resident up in the hallway and clean the poop out of her teeth because she was eating somebody else's excrement. Because she didn't know any better. Yep. Well, they don't have a clue what it's like.
They still don't.
No.
Chemical dependency people were in and out of here constantly. Minnesota had a law back in those days where it was treatment on demand and the snowbirds would come, you know, once it started getting cold out.
We called it weapons of insanity. If there was a homeless person that lived under a bridge south of town, come winter he did something to make sure he got 3 hots and a cot.
Yep. But we didn't have a lot of prisoner type clients.
Not here.
Now they would be, because they'd put them out there and they'd commit a crime and they'd clog up the jail system instead of they used to just bring them back, right back up here.
Because there's no structured following of them. Once they leave, they get off their meds and in 60 days they're back.
Yep, and then it takes 4 or 5 months to get them back into the therapeutic dose and your blood levels. And
they're not followed. You know, once they're discharged, and it's like feeding the lions.
That one client went nuts over here. He kind of barricaded himself in.
In this building?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a building here, just one guy. Did they want him to work for us, or how did we get to know him so well?
He was discharged and he had no place to go.
Yeah.
And so weapons of insanity set in, and he just thought, well,
that's what it was. He came over and just trashed
the building and the cars outside.
Yep.
And I'll end up back in the mental health division. It worked.
It worked.
I remember a horrible, horrible day on second floor right over there that I had one patient in the bathroom with a staff person throwing up because we had to give him Epicac. He ate a box of crayons. Another patient that had put his fist through a glass block window now had a cast on his fist and was hitting himself in the head. And I couldn't stop him, and the blood was running down his face. Another patient was vulgar and would swear at the other ones, and then that one particular would spit in her face.
Yep.
The dairy farm, at one time a patient had told the psychiatrist here that he was going to burn the barn down, cattle and all.
He did.
And he did. They didn't believe him, but he did. So the dairy barn fell by the wayside.
We were their family.
Yeah.
You know, we would have clients stop us in the hallway and say, I'd like a desk, or could you find me a better chair for my room? Or they'd come down and ask for stuff. Yeah. Got any batteries? Yeah. We supplied a lot of that, and we were as close to family as they had. You would hear things like in the floor above you, knowing full well there was nothing up there. Margot and I would hear things. The detached buildings were basically our junk storage areas. And you'd hear things, and you just kind of look, and you got used to it. You just kind of got used to it.
Yeah, I felt safe here.
Yep.
We had...
There was so many staff.
Yeah.
I mean, and the clients, if something would have happened where Margot and I were facing 3 MI clients in a showdown, the other clients would have come to our rescue.
Sure.
Wally would have given his life for either one of us.
Yeah.
You know, you stop that now. Come on now.
What's the matter with
Yep.
you? Yeah.
Everybody took care of each other, and staff and clients. And there was no us versus them. It was just, we all lived.
They were very happy here. It was sad when they left.
They made a law in Minnesota that you had to pay the clients a certain wage for working, so you couldn't no longer have them work 8-10 hours baling hay without paying them a living wage. And that kind of started the downfall because they didn't have the manpower anymore to be self-sufficient.
The dairy closed, Medallion Kitchens closed. The biggest employer now, I believe, is Lake Region Hospital and probably Otter Tail Power. And wow.
30 years ago in this city, when you drive through it, every single lawn, the reason that I came to this community, every house, every lawn was kept up nicely, nicely trimmed, and now they're just, and the economy is just slowly petering out.
See, this was an $18 million payroll.
Yeah.
And when the city lost that, they didn't realize what they were losing.
A lot of people moved on. It was a shame because there was probably 500 to 700 staff that made their living here. It was a self-contained city. In my opinion, Fergus Falls has done this. It's a slow, gradual decline. At the time they closed, you know, the average salaries went from $40,000 to well over $100,000 a year, which is way more than the average person makes in Fergus Falls. So people that can afford houses and buy cars and buy groceries and whatnot, there just isn't as much cash floating around in the community anymore. it's a nice community. It's just hard to make it.
Unfortunately,
Gotta have money.
The power off and turned the electricity off, the sump pumps went off also.
Yeah.
And there's springs underneath here. So the tunnels have filled up with water. So there's mold everywhere, and it's a mold you can't go in there without a mask on, a respirator.
It just started the degradation process that made it that much faster by not turning stuff on. How many of the DD clients passed away within a year or two after moving out into the group homes? Because this is where they were raised.
The transition was not smooth.
No.
From my standpoint, it was not smooth, because some of the group homes were hiring people off the street. They didn't have the training that we did.
Yeah.
And barely know how to make a nurse's bed.
I started here in '87 as a nurse, and Allie was born in '93. We were working together, I think, when Allie was born. Allie would ride on the carts with us. I mean, she was getting ice cream and going to the canteen from the time she could walk, and I think that's what kind of, she works in mental health at Lake Region, and she was never afraid of the clients, and they knew who Allie was, and I think it's a natural progression in families. Like you said, your parents worked here.
My mother was florist in the 1950 up until about 73, and Dad was the grounds supervisor. My grandfather, Eric Erickson, was an engineer in the plumbing department. I came to work here in 1982, full-time in '83, and I was a human services technician. I went to the community college and learned to be a nurse's assistant.
And your kids grew up on these grounds.
My kids grew up on the ground. I grew up on the ground.
And I think when the stigma's gone, that when one of your folks works up here or they've been exposed to it, that family then says, you know, it's not so bad. It's a good job. But I truly believe that once a family member either works here or is put here for treatment, it really made it okay after that. That's another thing that hurt these types of facilities, is depending on the views of whoever was in charge of the legislature at the time, funding either was granted or funding was cut, and it wasn't, facilities like this couldn't look ahead for 4 years, 10 years and make a plan, because whoever got into office could hatchet budgets right away. So you're flying by the seat of your pants every year. The state decided that all the clients should go back to the county where they came from, their home county. So the state put up these 4-bed group homes in Coochiching County, middle of nowhere. There's 2,000 people in the entire county. Well, to staff the homes, you weren't getting state employees going to move to the middle of nowhere. So they would hire them off the streets, and they had no training, no understanding, and it's no wonder so many of them passed away within a year or two after going.
Sure.
They didn't have a clue how to take care of them. There's still such a need for something like this.
Well, sure there is.
It's just astronomical, the number of beds you could fill. You know, you talk about these kids that come home from the Middle East, PTSD, and maybe a little structure here, and find a job and bus them downtown and get back on their feet. The mental health community, there's just no place for them. The type of client we had here is smart enough now to where they're clogging up the court systems in the county jails. They know that if I need my 3 hots and a cot, I can commit a crime and I can spend a few months here and have my bed. There's just no mental health help. It's a crying shame. You can't tell me that there's less mental illness out there than there was 40 to 100 years ago. You just cannot. If anything, there's more, in my opinion. They always made it sound like you were warehousing them, or it had some kind of a bad stigma to it. But if you could have talked to the clients, a lot of them loved it here. They had their friends, they made their rounds, they could work here and make a couple of dollars to go spend at the canteen and look forward to the fishing trips and whatnot. And I didn't see a lot of mistreatment here. I really didn't, and I don't think the clients felt that way. It's way more expensive to keep them in jail than it is to keep them in a facility like this. People don't want to fund this. Mental health does not go to the top of anybody's priority list. You know, you hear about it for a day after a mass shooting and then it kind of dies down. I think that every time there's a mass shooting. Do you? We need these facilities open.
They're not all in the mental health facility anymore.
No.
They're out in the public,
Yep.
And I mean, they sometimes don't know what they're doing.
No.
And now, I would guess in today's culture, they're probably on drugs.
Yep.
Or they've died.
A lot of our mental health clients here never committed a felony. They could go buy a gun at any gun shop. Mm-hmm. and there's more of them now because that's scary. God, bring back memories. We didn't have all the years in, but we saw more than probably anybody, Margot. There were moments when your job sucked worse than anybody's in the whole world, but for the most part, they paid you really, really well to come up and have a good time.